leading stories, trending topics, changing narratives. Welcome to another episode of Critical Conversations. I'm Dr. Rick Daniels, Director of Institutional Equity and Inclusion here at Oakton College. Today, we kick off Season 2 with a detailed look at the strategic plans that are shaping our future. I'm honored to be joined by President Joianne Smith, Dr. Ileo Lott, Dr. Jesse Ivory, and Dean Matt Huber to discuss the ways in which these transformative efforts are building just and thriving communities. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the Critical Conversations podcast today. How's everybody doing?
Great to be here.
Wonderful.
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Yes.
glad to have you here. Welcome to the Critical Conversations universe. I think it's going to be a great discussion today. Let's kick it off. I want to get right into it. President Joy, I'm going to come to you first. Tell us a little bit about the story of Vision 2030, and in particular, how we arrived at the theme to build just and thriving communities.
I'm happy to share the story. So when I think about Oakton's mission, there are three key words that really stand out, which is educate, empower, and transform. And as we began to develop our current strategic plan, we really challenged ourselves to cast a bold vision, to look beyond our commitments to individual students and their success, but really look at what is Oakton's role in the broader community. When we do our job well, we educate individual students, we empower them and their families, and we transform communities. So as we cast that broad vision, we really wanted to look at our role in the broader community. Are we changing the trajectory of individual students' lives? Are we breaking intergenerational poverty? Are we closing the racial equity gap? Are we creating the kind of community that we want to all be a part of? And so that was really the impetus for the long vision. So the bold, long vision is building just and thriving communities. It has a 3-year action plan because we recognize that the world changes really quickly. And so we wanted a long vision, but a shorter plan with 3 core pillars, all centered on justice and equity. So the 3 pillars are strengthening students' Oakton experience, recognizing that students come to us at various parts on their life journey. We want to meet students where they are, help them transition into Oakton, and then transition beyond, whether it's to a baccalaureate institution or directly to the workforce.
Yeah.
The second pillar is enhancing workforce readiness and community engagement, recognizing the important role of preparing our students for opportunities in the workforce and helping to meet the needs of our workforce partners. And then the third pillar is advancing racial equity. And so our strategies are all centered around those outcomes. And we're nearing the 3rd year of that current plan, and we'll soon begin to think about how do we build the next few years, still looking at those key pillars and that bold goal of creating just and thriving communities.
Absolutely. I appreciate that detailed explanation. I think that it's so interesting that we're in year 3 because many of the folks around this table have been able to engage in this plan and the administration of it. I want to hear from some of the other leaders. Tell me about your thoughts on Vision 2030, how it's impacted your work, and how you believe it's impacting the Oakton community.
I mean, I guess I will add that, it gives us guidance for the work that we need to be doing because there's so much work that needs to be done. And I think it's easy to get lost in trying to do everything. But this really gives us focus. And that's something then that you can drill down into your everyday work. And so even as you are talking to your teams about what are we prioritizing right now and why, this really gives us something to focus on. It gives us a bit of a true north in the direction that we're going. And so I really think that helps us to be really effective and efficient in the work that we're doing. And that's really important. And we know that, a lot of what we're focused on right now is really critical, especially as we're coming out of the pandemic and everything that has happened in higher education. This work is critical, it's timely. And so to have something that we're focused on to make sure that we're moving forward is really critical.
Yeah, I can also appreciate that Oakton is moving forward and continuing to move forward with work that centralizes racial equity and that centralizes equity as a core principle. We now see national organizations that are removing equity from their framework because of a lack of understanding. And so to be forward thinking in this day and age, quite frankly, is very dangerous. So I think that it takes a lot to be able to center that within the plan.
So I look at this work as valuable guidance for us as people who work at the college but really an important promise to our students. Can you imagine us not taking the thought and considering our students and doing this without a well thought out plan for them? So this is, it's for us, but it's really for them as well.
Yeah. Great point.
And I think it also is critical for the community that we serve as well as our District 535 here, in that it's a very public document framework that really helps explain our commitment to the community, our commitment to our students, our commitment to the service region that we provide, and where our mind is at, where our priorities are at, and how we are going to continue to serve the community, and where we're going to put our emphasis at moving forward as an institution.
Yeah, emphasis is a key word. Where are we putting our emphasis? Dr. Lott, that brings me back to you. I want to talk a little bit about Project OpenGate. That places emphasis on gateway English and math courses. Tell us a little bit more about this program and how it connects to the overall vision.
Thanks, Dr. Daniels. I'm actually really excited about it. Project OpenGate is a new student success initiative that's designed to raise awareness and actually provide some strategic and tactical guidance about the importance of successful completion of gateway math and English courses. So success in gateway courses is crucial for both individual student achievement and promoting equity in education. And this is all research-based. Research actually shows that students who pass these courses, especially in subjects like math, science, writing, are more likely to persist in their studies, complete the degrees that they have started, and graduate in a more timely fashion. Now, for instance, the Community College Research Center found that passing gateway courses significantly increases students' likelihood of degree completion, as these courses serve as early indicators of academic readiness and engagement. Importantly, equitable access to support in these courses is essential for closing these achievement gaps, particularly for underrepresented and low-income students who often face systemic barriers to success. So by providing target assistance in gateway courses, institutions can reduce disparities in academic outcomes, ensuring that all students, regardless of their circumstances, have an equal opportunity to succeed and thrive in higher education.
I really enjoy, again, the focus of that, because I struggled in math and English. I struggled in the courses before the gateway courses. So I think that to be able to pay it forward in this way is an excellent achievement. What has been the response from just anybody at the table? What has, if any, has there been a response across the college to this initiative and the idea around it in general?
I think that there have been some folks who have not fully understood why it's so important. So I think part of our role is continuing to help colleagues understand the very data that Dr. Lott referred to, why this matters. And we know when we disaggregate our data that our Black and Latinx students in particular, there's a huge gap. So it's also a key equity initiative for us.
And there are some within our academic community who are, waiting for it. Hey, let's do it. Up to and including not just the success in these courses, but let's look at sequencing the courses. Should you take math in your first semester?
Right. Yeah.
Taking math in your first semester.
That messed me up. That messed me up. I sorry not to cut you off, but you struck something in me. I think that taking it in my first semester is what contributed to my failing grade. I was really just getting adjusted. I kind of landed in school. It wasn't a linear pathway. I could have used the semester to get my mind together. So, sorry, please continue. I think you struck something in me.
And probably all of us. I was that student. Math was pushed off into the very end. It was horrible. So the math phobia that I always had only intensified as the time went on. I consistently sought ways of, can I take this instead of math? How do I get around it? And we know this barrier exists. So I just want to not have students go through that and have a better opportunity. And at the same time, if I can get some students through math, I might expose some students who are afraid of math to consider some career paths that they wouldn't have because they had that math avoidance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. I appreciate that outlook. I want to turn over our conversation over to Dean Matt Huber. Thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about the Strategic Enrollment Management 2.0 plan, how that aligns and what you see in terms of how that's going to help to contribute to our Vision 2030 goals.
So glad to be here, Dr. Daniels, and glad to talk about enrollment management anytime I get the chance. So At Oakton, in particular, our Strategic Enrollment Management Plan is a comprehensive strategy really designed to align the institution's fiscal, academic, co-curricular, and enrollment resources with our evolving environment. This has played critical during our addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, which is, I would say, one of the largest pivots and situations where we had to make some extreme decisions and change things up to address our current environment at the time. So the plan really aims to achieve long-term enrollment success and fiscal health while addressing our current challenges and leveraging our opportunities to strengthen our competitive advantages. So building on the success and the lessons that we learned from the first Strategic Enrollment Management Plan at Oakton, this plan focuses on ensuring our enrollment goals align with the institution's mission and vision, that it encompasses all of our enrollment areas, and that it positions the college strongly in a competitive marketplace. This enrollment plan is grounded in principles such as equity-centered strategies, institutional-wide participation in enrollment management, and a mission-driven focus on student success, integration of STEM into the academic and cultural context of the institution, and data-informed decision-making. Particularly with this plan, we focused on the necessity of adapting to changing demographics, focusing on our adult students and workforce education, as well as maintaining and improving service levels to meet student needs, while also acknowledging that we are in a district where our number of high school graduates is declining and that we're also seeing increased competition from other institutions.
So one of the things that I wanted to point out here that struck me was eliminating financial barriers. Tell me a little bit how we arrived at that point, how that is connected to the overall plan. And in particular, what do we envision for enhancing financial literacy? Tell me a little bit more about how we landed there.
So I think if you look at community colleges across the nation in particular, and Oakton's not exempt from that, a large challenge for students is being able to secure the financing, to be able to secure the financial aid, be able to pay for college. It's often a challenge. So when we look at our overall institutional statistics, that becomes a very, very important point for us to make sure that we're addressing. And so we're very, very honored and here at Oakton to be able to offer, over $1 million each year in student scholarships, to be able to offer federal and state funds to students to help them achieve their goals, their educational goals here at Oakton. And we will continue to look at that to figure out how we can position ourselves, how we can make adjustments, how we can use our institutional, federal, state dollars, and foundation dollars all together to make sure that we're providing the financial assistance to our students, particularly those that are the most vulnerable and are the most challenged by the increasing cost of college and continuing to pursue their education.
And how's that been received around the college? What has been the sentiment around some of our strategic enrollment efforts around the college from your perspective?
I think it's well received. I mean, obviously, we have a shared interest,
right?
In having enrollment. Period. That's a non-starter. We need enrollment, but I think we also have a strong shared interest, though, in looking beyond just the need for enrollment, but actually looking at these very systemic issues that actually prevent enrollment. So I think that's where I see the excitement that we're actually not only getting enrollment, but we're addressing some really big societal and systemic issues.
Yeah.
And that really connects to our broader vision of creating just and thriving communities.
Right.
So when we think about financial barriers, it's not just the cost of tuition, books, and fees. We know that for our students, 70% of whom are part-time, because they are working in order to be able to support their families and go to school, the true cost of attendance for them is not just the tuition, books, and fees, but it's reducing their hours at work so that they can actually go to school, so that they can pay their rent, so that they can take their children to childcare. That's the true cost of attendance. And as we really dive deeply into how do we help provide that kind of support and remove barriers, that's when we really see students thrive.
Here's one that may or may not make the show. Let me ask this question. Is enrollment still everybody's business?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Like a trick question.
Not really, but there is context to it. And the reason I say that is because we know enrollment to be everybody's business. But I've also said that equity is everybody's business too. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to really be able to give back into the students that come into our space, we have to look at all of the things that we do with an equity lens. And so the reason I ask that is because I do remember when I arrived at Oakton about 6 years ago, that was a common phrase, and there was a little bit of controversy around it. But I think that the reason, at least from my perspective, is because some people struggle to see themselves in the work of enrollment. And I think as the conversation has evolved, more people see themselves in the work of equity, which impacts our enrollment, which impacts all of the other things that we do. And so I ask, is enrollment still everyone's business? Because the real question, I guess, behind that is, has the conversation around that evolved? Or do we still have that sort of as a banner that we talk about as a talking point on campus?
I think it's still a talking point. I do think it's evolved. And I think in part, we are now in the development of our second Strategic Enrollment Management Plan. When we first developed the initial Strategic Enrollment Management Plan, I think far too many people thought enrollment was really marketing, recruitment, and admission. Mm-hmm. That's one piece of enrollment. But a more significant piece is making sure that the students who come to us, we are supporting so that they continue their enrollment to meet their goals. And that's how you start to see everybody's role is different in marketing, recruiting, retaining, supporting, telling their neighbors about the work that happens at Oakton, that they continue that the reputation in the community. So it is everyone's role, keeping the college attractive and welcoming. So whether you're in facilities, the police department, a faculty member in the classroom, or in direct student services, we all are a part of enrollment. We all need to look at that through an equity lens. So they intersect.
And I think this was broadly understood even years ago, even though maybe people didn't understand the language that we were using when we say enrollment. If you look back at the last time this college was up for reaffirmation of our accreditation, one of the things that the reviewer said is that everyone who we talked to really understand the mission, vision, and values of this college. That's part of it. So we might not have been saying it in the way that we say it, about enrollment management, but we were actually embracing that work and leaning into it together.
That's a good point.
And I think I would add to that too, as we were talking, I'm thinking about just higher education in general. We often define our roles within this work and even our training, right? That comes into higher education. Those of us that might have gotten a master's in higher education, you're defined to, this is going to be your role in your work that you are going to do. And so I think some of it has to do with how we've been trained. And then we come into the space and say, I'm responsible for this because somebody told me that I was. And so we're also having to kind of break what has typically been the approach to higher ed. And so some of it, in that way, I want to give grace to folks that might not have always seen their work or defined it in that way. But part of it is that, you're in charge of equity. You're in charge of, enrollment. You're in charge of athletics, whatever that is. And so you come in with that kind of training and you have to kind of unlearn that a little bit, honestly, to be able to do what you need to do. So I think part of it is also shifting the paradigm in higher ed in general about what is our role. Yes, I may have a priority or a focus, or I may lead a very specific area, but I'm responsible for it all.
Yeah. Excellent. That's a great segue into talking about the equity plan. And I think that question, it helps to lead into that because the primary goal of the plan is to eliminate disparities. And we see those in different areas of the college. A large part of what you talked about, Dr. Lott, in terms of addressing the societal issues that then come with the students when they, enter into our campus doors. The goal is to eliminate disparities in student and employee outcomes. And so we started off with the Illinois Equity and Attainment Plan, also known as Ileo or ILEA. I think there's still some discussion on the correct pronunciation. But I want to shout out Joletta Patrick for being a leader in that work and creating a framework that led us to some key insights and key data points that then led to our current strategic equity plan that's slated to go from 2024 to 2026. These insights helped us to identify 6 strategies to promote equity at Oakton. And I'll just go through those briefly. The first is to utilize our Equity Policy Audit 2.0, which is our process for reviewing policy and procedure with an equity lens. The second is to leverage the Workforce Equity Initiative grant, which we're going to get to in just a second. Launch Project Open Gate, which we just talked about. Continuing to institutionalize support for the Office of Access, Equity, and Diversity. Leveraging our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leadership Council to cascade our practices across the college, and investing in professional development for college employees to improve the culture of belonging for students and employees. The reason why I've really liked the 6 strategies is because they address disparities in student and employee outcomes. And a lot of times the focus tends to be so much on the students that we don't always give enough attention to the needs and concerns of the employees that then feed back into the students. And so the idea here was to have a balanced approach to see how we can create and cultivate a culture of inclusion and belonging across the college. But speaking specifically about some of the student initiatives, I want to come to you, Dr. Jessie, to talk about the Workforce Equity Initiative. Tell us about this fascinating program, some of your goals around it, and how it's been impactful in the community so far.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Daniels. The Workforce Equity Initiative, I think we've been doing this now. It feels like forever, and sometimes it feels like yesterday, but since fall of 2022. And really this program, it was started by a grant by the Illinois Community College Board that has the same name, the Workforce Equity Initiative Grant. And really it aims to accelerate entry and success in post-secondary education and training programs that lead to high-skilled, high-wage, emphasis on high-wage, and high in-demand occupations. And for this initiative, it really prioritizes the Black and African American community as well as unemployed and underemployed. That's a big one too. Yeah. Residents, especially in zip codes that have lower average wages. So looking at our framework, just to kind of give you a little bit more about the Workforce Equity Initiative, there's kind of, I guess you could say, 5 areas of focus in terms of our work. We provide access to accelerated training that leads, again, to higher demand, high wage opportunities. We provide aid that supports tuition, books, some of the other fees, and other college-related costs. We also are very intentional about, and this was mentioned earlier, about intentional access to wraparound support, really, which includes access to stipends. And now we're also looking at how we can expand access to things like bus and gas cards. They may seem small, but we know that transportation is a major issue, I think, for a lot of students, but we know particularly for the students that we are serving. And then we're also thinking about, how we can be more intentional about the connections to community-based organizations and social service agencies that may be able to expand support in housing and all of that. And so really looking at how we can expand our support. We also offer a lot of intrusive coaching and support, which I'll just say it's very resource heavy to do that, to be proactive in the outreach to students. A lot of times when they're going through crisis or something is happening, they're not reaching to us. Right. Or they don't know to reach to us. And so we will actively reach out to our students to make sure that they are doing well. And usually that opens the door for them to be able to tell us about any needs that they may have. And then the final, tenet of the framework, which is really important, is really these very intentional connections to employers through the work that is being facilitated by dedicated, I think that's important to say, dedicated employer engagement specialists. So we want to make sure you get into employment. And that's really critical, but we have to do that in a very intentional way. And so when we look at the work that we're doing through the Workforce Equity Initiative, that's really been informing everything that we do over the last 3 years. Now, as it relates to, how this relates to Vision 2030 or SIM 2.0, there's a few things that we can point out. First, while we serve all students, and I think it's important to say that, again, we do prioritize a focus on a lot of our strategies on improving access and success for Black adult learners. And here's why we do that. And I think it's important to always talk about why we do that, especially in this work that we do as far as DEI. When you look at the reports, when thinking about financial pressures or economic stability, Black learners are more likely than any other group to deal with emotional and mental stressors. Not to say that none of the students do, but they are more likely. And a lot of that is usually related to financial pressures. We know that Black learners are also more likely to be working full time than any other group, and they are more likely to serve as caregivers. So that's a new area of focus for study in higher ed, is really looking at the number of folks that are having to do caregiving and that impact also on the financial status of students and their ability to participate in higher education. We know when we look at income levels, and so this is something we're studying in our district, We know that income levels for those that are in the Black community are on average lowest among all groups. And so, when we think about those types of outcomes, as well as looking at employment, those that are in the Black community are more likely to be represented in lower wage roles across multiple industries. Those are things that we have to consider when we're thinking about advancing racial equity. And that's the alignment with Vision 2030. But then as we think about our other tenets of enhancing workforce readiness, we're improving economic and social mobility, through access to high demand, high wage jobs. And again, through our work with, offering the truce of support, aid to support tuition and other college related costs, as well as access to wraparound support services, we are really implementing what's called barrier reduction strategies. Which really gets to
say that one more time for the people in the back.
Barrier reduction strategies. Yeah, those studies are really critical, and those wraparound support services are really critical. And so we're strengthening the student experience, which is part of Vision 2030. And as we spoke about earlier, we're really helping to eliminate or alleviate financial barriers, which is part of SIM 2.0. So there's a lot of incredible work that is happening. And we're making sure that, again, this is aligned with where we're going as a college.
Yeah, great tie-ins. And I really appreciate the ways in which you highlighted the way that program is central and connects to all three plans. I'm reminded of the video that we showed at one of our, I think it was opening day last year or earlier this year in January, and the impact that had on the campus in terms of having a visualization of the students who are most impacted by this program. So kudos to you and the folks that work in that area for putting that together. You said something at the end that I think is going to help us to wrap this conversation up. There's a lot of great things happening. And I think that as an institution, just like any other institution or organization, there are many ways in which we can improve. But I'd be remiss if we didn't at least take the time to point out the great things that are happening at Oakton that help to build just and thriving communities. So before we wrap up, I want to give just a quick moment for anyone who would like to give any final takeaways about this work, about how to encourage Oakton community members and those that are listening to embrace and look into and lean into this work. Any sort of final takeaways that we can give our listeners today?
One of the analogies that I always use with my team to try to kind of help us focus on what we're doing. When I bought a house some years ago, I didn't know how many times I was going to have to be on a ladder.
I know that's right.
And I'm very afraid of that. And whenever I'm on the ladder, I have to tell someone, can you come outside and put your foot on the bottom of the ladder and stabilize it while I climb? And so I often tell my team, we're helping students to climb by stabilizing the ladder.
Yeah.
And so look at your work as what can we do to stabilize that ladder so it's not so shaky that either you can't climb it or you're going to fall off of it at some point. And really see yourselves as stabilizing that ladder. It is the student who is the hero. I think that's the thing that I always want to say too, even as we highlight these programs and we talk about the great work we're doing, the students are the hero in this story. And they're the ones that are going to have to climb the ladder and take advantage of these opportunities. But if we can help them by stabilizing the climb, then we're doing the work that we need to do.
Yeah.
As I think about things that we've done and accomplishments that we've made and that propel us to continue to have movement forward. Oakton is an outstanding institution. It has been for over 50 years. And we've historically have served a traditional student population, and those being students that are coming directly out of high school. And our focus on adults has been more ancillary. But I think it's incredibly important, and I'm very proud to work for an institution that is determined that we've done really well at that. We're now going to move to the adult population. We're now going to move to the populations that have been underserved. And we're not just going to blanket them with a message that is, one message fits everyone like we've probably done many, many years ago. But we're going to be strategic and about what our efforts are going to be so that we are targeting students, whether it's from the recruitment standpoint, but also from the student services standpoint, and also from the financial aid and financing college standpoint. Like, how are we going to change things up and move forward from the status quo that we've been used to for much of our history to be able to move us forward? And when we do that, then we are addressing the diverse needs of our community.
It's such important work. And I'll just reiterate a lot of what we said, but students don't know that they have barriers always. They know what those barriers feel like. And it manifests in different ways. And where there is no barrier is when that student turns around to walk back out of our doors. And that's exactly what we don't want. Yeah. So we want to remove the barriers so that doesn't happen, because it's easy to just walk back and say, forget it, this is too hard. Yeah. And I think that we're doing all that we can to prevent that from happening. And I also believe that we're starting to see the fruits of our labor. We're starting to see a different type of student engagement and student completion.
I agree. And I'd say, I hope that what folks have heard today is the intentionality with which we're trying to live out our mission, vision, and values. Oakton has always been a place, I think, that cares about students. But we were less focused and intentional on the strategies. And I'm, thanks to the great work that you heard from my colleagues here today and so many others at the college, I think we're working with intentionality to change the lives of not only the students on our campus, but the members of our community, to really change not just one student, but the ripple effect that happens when we do our job well. We really do change lives, empower individuals, and transform communities. And when we do it with intentionality, we can really build just and thriving communities together.
That's a word from our president, y'all. Wow, what a great way to wrap up this conversation today. Thank you, President Joy, and thank you to all of our special guests for sharing your insights on Oakton College's strategic plans. For our listeners, stay tuned for more episodes of Critical Conversations. We'll be back next month to talk about Learning Day 2024. We also have some exciting bonus content planned for you, with many of our colleagues around the college providing insight on topics related to the work we do and also the larger society. Once again, thank you for joining us on Critical Conversations Season 2, Episode 1. Until next time, take care.